Welcome to Level Up and Friends, where those of us from the video game and comic book store, Level Up Entertainment, get together each week with some friends and have a different discussion. This week we're talking Invincible, not just the new hit animated series, but the original comic book source material. I'm your host, Scott, and joining me this week I've got Kendall.
Hello there.
How's it going? So you and I have kind of an interesting history with Invincible because we used to read it back when we were in high school. Way before anyone knew about it, or at least not the way people talk. At least not the way people talk about it now, because it started back in 2003. Although I don't think we read it initially, because I know what we used to do is like we would buy trade paperbacks of series that we were both interested in, and then we would trade them back and forth, so that we can read them. And I know you were picking up Invincible, and you were like, "Hey, this is really good. You should read it." So I read your trades until we caught up to the comics, and then we started reading the comics.
Yep.
But yeah, so since you were my introduction to it, what was your introduction to it?
Dang, I don't even know how I heard about it or found out about it. But I do remember like later in high school, while still being like predominantly into superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think maybe before I even realized it, I was like kind of losing interest in the Joe Quesada and Dan Didio, however you say his name, like Marvel and DC like stuff. Not that I wasn't reading those, but I don't know. So yeah, I like saw myself like checking in on like Savage Dragon, which like was a franchise I discovered through like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles like years before. And
yes, they had a 2-part crossover.
Yeah, and they also had this like weird toy line.
Oh, really?
Like I think it was like mainly a Savage Dragon toy line maybe, but there was like 3 of the 4 turtles were in it. It was really random.
Yeah.
And like Jim Lee did the design. It was weird.
Yeah, we should point out this is when Ninja Turtles were being published by Image Comics, the parent company, both Savage Dragon and Invincible.
Yeah. So I think I just like was looking for other interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
I found Invincible.
Yeah, and this is co-created by Robert Kirkman, also creator of Walking Dead. This predates Walking Dead, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure, as we talk about our experiences with the comic series and how we did it. But this, I think at the time, this was my favorite comic book. I know I called it the most consistently good comic, like at least superhero comic we were reading at the time. And I think it was a little ahead of its time in a way where it takes a lot of the superhero tropes and kind of twists them. Whereas like now, like everything's kind of done that. And watching the show and talking about it with people, because that's the thing that's like most exciting about the TV show is it felt like this thing that like I used to like a long time ago that nobody remembers, and now all of a sudden everybody's talking about it and everybody's enjoying it. So I'm not trying to sound like hipster, like we were here first, but it's like the secret's out, but
yeah, it's fun though.
Yeah. In a good way. I'm not trying to, be like, oh, you guys should have been here in 2003, almost 20 years ago. God damn, we're old. But yeah, so but like, we're now in like a post The Boys world where like evil superheroes are kind of like, that's become its own cliche now. But the thing I like about how Invincible handles like that element of the series is like the book is still got a lot of traditionally good and fun, lighthearted superhero stuff in it, along with like I guess spoiler. It's not really spoiler if you watch the show. It happens in the first episode.
Oh, I guess we should say right here and now.
Yeah,
we're going to be talking about things beyond what the show has adapted.
Yeah,
like very spoiler filled episode.
I think we'll talk about what happens in the first season, versus like both in the comic and the show, and then after I think we discuss that stuff, I think we'll go into some comic book spoilers and talk about like what we were excited to see and how we think they might adapt it, because I have some thoughts on that. But so there'll be mostly show spoilers for a bit. We'll let you know before we like really dig into comic book spoilers. But just be warned, like some of them might pop up now and again. But so Mark Grayson, the human alter ego of the titular character Invincible, his dad is essentially this world's Superman. But it turns out that he's secretly a bad guy, kind of grooming the planet to be taken over by his people. And they have kind of, a big falling out. So like bad guy Superman is like, it's like the one thing everyone tries to go to when they're like, oh, I'm going to make an edgy superhero thing. But I like that Omni-Man isn't like in the beginning. Like I remember when I first read it in the comics and like he kills their equivalent of the Justice League, which happens not much later in the comics, but it doesn't happen right off the bat like it does in the show.
Yeah.
I remember being like, oh my God at the time. And then like the fight that they have between Invincible and Omni-Man, I remember being like really like a big gut punch the first time I read it. Like, I can't believe this is happening. Granted, I think they do take it to another level in the cartoon, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I just remember being like really like I'd never seen anything like this at the time. And to be fair, we were like 17, so we definitely haven't seen as much as I've had the chance to see now. But I that's what got me hooked, because in the beginning it's like, oh, it's a fine, like it's clearly a parody of DC and Marvel, because so many characters are very analogous. Like you can draw one-to-one lines with like all of the Guardians of the Globe are just the big seven in the Justice League, except the Immortal, who's kind of a special case.
Yeah, and I think it's clear because he's the only one who comes back.
Yeah.
In one of the trades, like Kirkman's like, oh yeah, like I have to like make you care about these characters quickly, and that the best way to do that is to riff on something you would probably already know.
Yeah. And like the cast is super likable, like right off the bat too. Like you love Mark's mom. He's getting, he's that like traditional, like naive, like teenage superhero. But like, there's even like supporting characters, like Titan's kind of cool. Like the, sort of bad guy he teams up with. Adam Eve is a great character. Like all of the like the original characters that aren't analogous to the the Justice League are always were fun to be right from the get-go. So even though it is like parodying superhero comics, it is still a superhero comic, so it does still have fun with it. And I think that's where like the surprising violence comes from. I don't think it's gory for the sake of being gory, but I think it's more realistic take on what these kinds of characters would do to each other.
Yeah, well, and so it's interesting because I reread a bunch of the comic, just because like the show did a really great job of making me like remembered what I loved.
Yeah, really awakened like, oh man, I really loved this. I want to go back to it.
Yeah. They kind of hold that violence back for a while.
Yeah,
that's like first episode of the show. It's like, they're punching the crap out of like the Flaxians or whatever, and they're just like.
Yeah, and I think that's why it was like so impactful when like because when you saw the violence happen with Omni-Man, it was like, oh my God, because what did we used to call it, like the buckets of paint comic.
Yeah.
Because it would be so violent. Everyone just looks like they got dumped with a bucket of red paint. There's so much blood.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's but I think it's used well. Like I said, the show adapts it differently, so you get a lot more of that. Like there's a part where like there's a mad scientist kind of villain that Mark punches in the jaw, but like it breaks his jaw. I don't think he was really intending, but like because he's so much stronger than regular people. But like so there's elements like that sprinkled throughout. But yeah, when the the big superhero stuff starts happening, like it gets pretty intense in terms of that stuff. Even though it looks like a fun superhero show you could show your kids, it's very much not.
Yeah.
Um, which is fine. I mean, I think there's more superhero stuff for adults now than there are for kids, which is this whole other conversation we could be having.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. But yeah, so I guess we'll talk a little bit about the show and our thoughts on that. Overall, I liked it. I have my issues with it, but I'll let you get your thoughts out first, Kendall.
I mean, I liked it a lot. Yeah, did I have any like big issues that I can think of? Let's look at the notes. Not really. I think that the show did a good job of and it has the benefit of like this story was already done once.
Yeah.
So like I think it does a lot of things better than the show, I'm sorry. I think the show does a lot of things better than the comic.
I can agree.
And like story-wise, I think it's like much more solid. At the same time, I feel like the comic is more fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't. It's been something I've been like trying to articulate why, like leading up to this discussion we're having on it.
Yeah.
And I can't figure out why I have more fun reading. Maybe I just love comics more. I don't know.
It's possible, because I've also been of two minds of this. I was kind of hoping our discussion would help me clarify some of my thoughts on it, because overall the show's good, and I do think it has adapted some stuff of the comics a little bit more cohesively. But yeah, like it's missing something fun that the comics have. Not that this show is like joyless, but I think maybe it's because it's got a little bit more of the violence throughout it, rather than like more of the fun, like lighthearted superhero stuff. Even though it has some of that, it always seems to end in like a gore fest, whereas it doesn't always happen in the comic.
Yeah, like sometimes he just fights Furnace and saves the day,
Yeah. But like I do like a lot of things that they have adapted and changed in the show. I mean, well, the whole thing with Alan is still great, so I'm super happy that wasn't altered that much.
Love Alan.
Alan the Alien's the best character. I didn't realize he was played by Seth Rogen until the very end of the series.
So yeah, same.
Yeah, and then I realized he was
I was like, wait, I know this voice.
Yeah, and then I realized he was the executive producer or something.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's he still has a great joke. I love when Mark's like at the end is like, well, what are you gonna do next? I guess I'll finish high school, and then it shows like all of these things happening. It's like, oh, that's great. What's high school? And then just hard cuts to the end. Yeah, no, he's a really fun character. I think because we're more focused, like the Omni-Man relationship and his whole deal is more brought, because it's revealed early in the first episode. It's brought more to the forefront of the story of the first season. I think it takes away from some screen time that some of the more fun supporting characters could have had, which might be why the show feels less quote unquote fun than the comics. Not saying that's a bad thing, because I do think they did the Omni-Man stuff very well, and there's a reason like he's like become memed to death.
Yeah.
It's a really compelling story, and it's told very well, and it's told. Yeah, it's arguably told better in the show, but like you said, that has the benefit of adapting something that already came forward that was good initially.
Yeah, and just like, yeah, you're like, most of the time comics aren't made in like in big chunks, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, they're done like issue to issue, more or less.
Yeah.
Like, you might have like your story kind of planned out, but you don't start getting to the details, and like you're looking at a more micro level, because you have to get like a chapter out every month.
Yeah, especially back then.
Yeah.
And especially with like a monthly series. Like I
Yes.
think these days, kind of especially with Image, you see a lot more like how like Saga is like an ongoing series, but it's done in these chunks. Or
Hmm.
you have something like Headlopper, which is like 4 issue minis that come out like I think quarterly they come out
Yeah.
and then like he's done until the next one. Like I think you know comics now have evolved to like be similar to like seasons of television shows
And I think
you
that's
know
made them a lot stronger. I would
oh for
say
sure.
like I think Robert Kirkman might have been the facilitator of uh just this change in Image, because Image started in the 90s. Creators, a bunch of creators, mostly from Marvel, left to form their own comic book company so they can own the things that they make, which is great because Image has continued to be like creator focused and creator owned properties. But they were really chasing the Marvel and DC dragon, like monthly superhero-y kind of things. Um, about Invincible, but really when Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman's Walking Dead hit later, I think it started becoming more diverse. And I really like now that, yeah, they do a lot of like, the creators seem to set the pace for their books too. Like they're not everything needs to be constantly monthly on that monthly deadline. Like they have plenty of stuff that is, but like I like that everything's become more diverse and more interesting. And Image seems to really support not just their fans but the comic book in like retailers and stuff as well. When we get lots of promotional stuff, they do like a lot of like no risk number one. Like basically all of their number ones are kind of no risk for retailers, where like if after a certain point, like whatever issues don't sell, we can return and get our investment back on. So it really encourages us to do a lot of experimentations with new books. Most of their ongoing series, when they have trades, the first volume is $10, so it's cheaper. So you can kind of get in and try more things. But I think a lot of that stuff started in this early 2000s era, at least in my experience with Image Comics. This used to not be a thing I was really into. They were really 90s for like to a detriment where like it was a big turnoff for me because I'm not a big fan of
Weren't
like
you
that
reading a
style.
bunch of Spawn back then?
I was also like 15, and Spawn like appeals like
Yeah, yeah. I don't mean that as
yeah,
a
yeah,
insult,
yeah, yeah.
not at all. But like,
But like going back and rereading that stuff, it has not stuck with me the way that like something like Invincible will. Like even before the show, it's a book I occasionally think about because like we always carried it in the store, but like nobody really bought it until the show came out. Now I can't keep it on hand, which is
yeah,
which is exciting
awesome.
because it's a really good book and like people are finally getting into it. And this is Robert Kirkman's the only one that like seems to make stuff that like that gets adapted to other media that translates into the comic sales, because like this and Walking Dead are the only examples like I can see that I can consistently point to. Like whenever a new season of Walking Dead came out, like sales would go up on the
Do
on the
you
graphic
think it's
novels.
because they're like and I know like the MCU is an ongoing story, but
Yeah.
do you think it's because like their television like programs like so the serial nature of TV like kind of translates better to comics than like here's Thor Ragnarok and
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's a fair statement. But not every TV show translates to comics. And I think Lock and Key and Umbrella Academy had like a smaller like bump. I think Umbrella Academy a little bit more than Lock and Key, just because that one's so much weirder. But then like a comic book show I love, like Doom Patrol, like doesn't translate into anything. Harley Quinn's cartoon doesn't translate into anything. Like there's like 5 million Batman shows, and that doesn't really translate to Batman sales. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a I mean, I there is an argument that the general populace hasn't really seen anything quite like Doom Patrol, but like
Yeah. And Doom Patrol's a niche thing, which if you we'll do a whole episode on that when the next season of that comes out. But I really like that show. It's like the best live action thing DC's like done since The Dark Knight.
Yeah, I think with the other things though, like Batman, like I don't think unless like Batman just like ceased to appear in, you know, pop culture for 20 years or something, like nothing's gonna.
Yeah, I'm wondering then if it's because like Walking Dead and like Invincible are like, or those other shows where I do see a correlation between TV show and comic sales, if they're because they're a little less mainstream, a little more niche like interest. Because like Invincible's on Amazon Prime, which is the worst streaming service. It's so hard to find anything you want on there. It's just filled with so much garbage, which is why I guess they bought MGM. But like, you know, so people that have to find it like are looking for it specifically, so they're already like more interested in it than like your average like, oh, this show says Gotham in it, I know what that is, I can watch that.
And also, I mean, like, I don't know. Yeah, like Harley Quinn, that cartoon could be the best thing ever made, but like, I mean, like, people see Harley Quinn in the, you know, Suicide Squad.
Yeah, I
like,
guess it's she's kind of, yeah, I guess because there's only one other source for this
yeah,
like
exactly.
material.
Like,
Yeah. So I guess there's something to be said, like, yeah, maybe we should stop over flooding the markets with all of the same superheroes over and over and over again. Like,
yeah.
we're getting yet another
But
Batman
anyway,
reboot.
I feel like we've gotten off topic.
Yes, we have, but I think it's interesting and related to it because that's one of my favorite things about not just because like as a retailer, like I make more money, but like it's really exciting and gratifying to see this book that I was a fan of, like like the source material being popular and consumed as well as like a popular adaptation of it. I will say that the shows and the book are similar enough that I think they'll spoil one another. So if you do at least the first season, so if you do read the comic or watch the show, it might be a little similar. Like Walking Dead veers off very differently from the comics, even though there's some broad strokes that are similar. But that was one of the cool things about that one is that you could enjoy one without spoiling the other, so you can still enjoy the other.
Yeah, this seems to be a pretty, which is something I don't typically like, but this was, I don't know, when it's done better, I guess
Yeah.
I'm cool with it.
Yeah,
But,
there's some twists to it. Some of the things I don't especially liked about the show, and this is probably going to be like, I'll admit this is probably very nitpicky, but I don't like the animation and the art style on the show. I think it's very bland Western attempt at anime style, to the point where it's also like I can tell when like characters are just standing around so their mouth can move, which Invincible's design, like you don't have to animate the top half of his face, so you're very lucky. Like I can see the corners cut, but it does animate very well when it needs to, like when the big action scenes and stuff start. But like I think because Ryan Otley did almost all of the issues of the comic, like the art for it, like his style is so, his look is so much a part of the identity of Invincible, and this is probably my own baggage from the comics coming in, that like it doesn't really look right to me. Do you know what I mean?
I hear you.
Like I think it was like even like 10% more closer to his style, I would like it a lot more.
I think it kind of is maybe maybe not really. I don't know. But when I, after watching the first episode or two and then like opening the first trade, I was like, oh, I can like see it. So maybe it's like closer to Cory Walker's, although I don't think that's entirely accurate.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The animation actually ended up not bothering me as much as I thought it would when I saw the trailer.
It was a little bit more of a hurdle for me. Like it's as the show got on and you kind of got into it, it wasn't so bad. I do think that the teenage drama I was way stronger than I remembered it being, like way more prevalent. You've been rereading the comic the last couple of days. Like has that been the case?
So I mean there are issues that don't have any teenage drama, but I think it's pretty, it follows very similar beats. That is actually one part that is so much better in the show than the comic.
Mm-hmm.
William is insufferable in the comic. At least early on.
Is he too much like that sassy gay best friend?
No, William doesn't come out of the closet until later in the comic. Because if you remember, him and Eve date briefly.
I don't remember that. I
Yeah.
remember Eve with Rex for a long time.
That's actually not as long as you'd think.
It's just one of those things. Like, yeah, I haven't revisited it really in a while. I kind of skimmed a bunch of issues to refresh my memory. So like I remember where like big points happen, and we'll get into it later. But like things happen way different than way sooner than I remembered them being when I was reading them, month to month or whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, William is insufferable in the comic. And Amber in the comic is like just like really boring.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think she's like a lot more interesting in the show and actually has like a character.
Yeah, that's the thing is I didn't even remember her. Because before I watched the show, like Wes was because I don't have Amazon Prime, I had to borrow it from somebody to watch it because I don't like to give Jeff Bezos money if I can help it. But so Wes was talking to me about it, and he knew I liked the comic, and was asking me questions about it. He was talking about like Amber and Williams. I was like, I don't even remember those characters. Like, and then I was watching, I was like, I don't remember Amber at all. Is she like new for the show? But I guess she.
I mean, her design is new for the show, but
yeah,
like she's just some like white blonde girl.
Yeah, I was flipping through it and I was like, who is this white blonde girl? I was like, was that Amber? Did they make her, change her to black in the show? Which is fine. For a character like that, like, who cares?
She's way cooler.
Well, she's played by Zazie Beetz in the show, right?
Yeah.
And I think that goes a long way. Like, her character has a lot more personality, and a lot of it, I think, comes from the performance.
One interesting thing they did change, and this is getting into the comic. But yeah, Amber's just like Amber in the show. Mark keeps disappearing and letting her down, and she keeps giving him chances, and he keeps blowing it. And then like after their last breakup in the season, Mark reveals that he's invincible.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, I know, but you just like didn't share it with me. So
yeah, I like that it doesn't make it okay. The things
in the comic, Mark, Omni-Man leaves Earth, so Mark is now Cecil's go-to guy.
Yeah.
So he has a beeper and he's always getting called away. So Amber's like, oh, he's dealing drugs. And yeah, it's like pretty corny, and she breaks up with him. And then he's bummed about it. So he's like, I'm gonna go tell her. And she comes home from like classes or whatever, and he's in her dorm room. She's like, how did you get in here? And he's like, oh, I came in through the window. She's like, oh, this is the third story. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? And then like he gets peeped away again, and he's like, oh, I swear I'll explain.
Yeah.
But she eventually figures it out.
Mm-hmm.
Which I appreciated that she was able to figure it out in the comic as well.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay. She's like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah, I like that in the show that she gets to it much, because she's a much more perceptive character in the show. Because I like that she tries to, I like that they live in a world with superheroes, so like that is a natural thing you could realize. And because, Mark his mask only really covers like the top half of his face. Like you could probably figure that out.
Yeah.
Although it is funny that like nobody figures out Adam Eve is their classmate, even though she doesn't wear a mask. So when they find out, you know, they're like, oh, they don't even like know which one she is. She's like, I'm the pink one. Which is it's a funny joke. You know.
Yeah. But also there's an
element of that in the comics too.
There's like so many superheroes. Like
they talk about that in the comics too. They're like, no, because they're like Adam, Eve, and Invincible are like at the school switching into superhero personas, but they're like, if you just fly, nobody ever looks up. Like, you know, so it's like it's all good. Which is true, because that's what happens in comics. Nobody ever does.
There is a scene in the comic where their school gets destroyed, their high school.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, like one of them's like, oh, should we go help? And the other one's like, oh, like if Invincible and Adam Eve are at that one particular high school, like someone's either gonna like recognize us or like question why we chose like this one school in the entire world, because like the whole world got like invaded by aliens or whatever, and like they messed a bunch of stuff up.
Yeah, I do like that the high school they kept the Reginald Val Johnson thing, and they actually got him to play the principal.
That was amazing.
That's who he was always designed to be, because his last name's Winslow too.
It
feels like a joke that they're like, oh, we can just slide that in, and then you know it's come full circle now.
Yeah, it very much like the Nick Fury, Ultimate Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson thing.
Yeah, where they're like, yeah, he's designed after Samuel L. Jackson. They kind of did that with The Boys too, where Huey was supposed to be Simon Pegg, but by the time they finally got around to adapting it, he was too old. But now he plays that character's father.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Which if you haven't watched that, that's a good show.
I haven't watched that.
Yeah.
Maybe one day I'll get,
yeah.
I feel like I have a
there's a lot to experience.
Huge list of media to consume and only so much time.
Yeah. But I like that show I like way better than the comic. Whereas this one, like it's not as clear cut, which is fine. It's, you know, I don't necessarily mind when we get like a better version, as long as you can do when you're adapting something, whatever you're doing, like adapting it to, like you can do it to fit the strengths of that medium. I prefer, you know, like that's fine. Even if you're telling this like a very similar story again, like usually I really like when you do something kind of different when you're readapting things, but something like Invincible, like which only has existed in one form, this is a good way to kind of bring it out to everyone. Whereas like they announced like a new Ninja Turtles movie, I was like, I want it to be something completely different. I want them to go to the Triceraton homeworld or something I haven't seen before. You know?
Yeah, maybe that idea about them being aliens isn't the worst thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, I mean, it just was a bad thing on top of a million other like bad movie decisions in that movie specifically.
But yeah, we'll have our 9th Ninja Turtle podcast at some other point.
Yeah. But you know, speaking of Ninja Turtles, like one of the strengths of something like Invincible, which is also a strength that something like we've talked about that Ninja Turtles has, is the character, and the characters and the concept are so flexible enough that you can kind of put them in any situation and it works. You know, like, you know, in this season, like in early on, like Invincible goes to Mars and like has to deal with a bunch of alien things, versus like, you know, in the comics, he's going to go to like way crazier things are going to happen than just regular superhero stuff. But, you know, the regular superhero stuff, like that's all fun and fine, and like it all fits in with this world that they've created.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And like one of the cool things is like now, like the Omni-Man thing is such a cornerstone part of the Invincible like character and universe, that like now that that's done in the first season, I can see them doing, like, they teased a bunch of like stories that are stories in the comics that will be coming up, but like they could really kind of do some more different things now that that is done, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I always hope for different things, but I also wouldn't be bummed if they kept doing what they're doing.
Yeah,
like taking like what was great about the comic and, you know, reworking it so it flows better. And
yeah, and it's great TV now.
Yeah,
because one of the things, like this might be slightly off topic, but it's a good illustration of like what I did. So I really like the One Hero, or not One Hero, My Hero Academia anime, and then once the first season whatever was done, I switched over to the manga, and I was reading the manga. I really liked that, so I started watching the new season when they started adapting that stuff. Like, it's so boring because it's exactly the same. Whereas like this, like, yeah, like I said, like they're taking the same, they're painting with the same colors, but making a different piece of art with them.
Yeah, it's the same toys in the toy box.
Exactly. And yeah, but like it's enjoyable on its own thing. Another like nitpick is I'm not wild about the pop culture like songs, like the pop songs in it.
No,
Yeah,
bad.
I think it might just be like a personal taste thing. I'm not a big fan of when stuff does that, unless you're gonna like really incorporate it into like the characters' worlds and stuff.
It was cool. I think I forget what episode it is, but there's been like Bleached I really like. They had a song in there. So I was like, oh, that was cool. And then the season ending on that Hive song.
Yeah. That one wasn't too bad, but like,
and like it was also like kind of period appropriate for like when the comics were coming out.
Yeah, the early 2000s there. Yeah.
It's like I feel like that was like a huge like song.
It's something that might grow on me, but I found it took me out when it happened the first few times. I'm like, oh, they're doing this thing. I don't know, that feels like a cliche to me, and not a good way. And again, it's a nitpick. It might be a personal thing. It does not ruin the experience for me. I still would highly recommend the show. One thing the show does that's kind of fun is the title screen, like it always comes up when someone's about to say Invincible. And there's a joke where he's trying to come out to Amber, and you're like, oh, he's gonna say, hey, and it's gonna cut, and then she slams the door in his face, and like just going. Like, oh, that's fun. Just to talk some generalities about Invincible. I really like his design. I think it's like immediately like striking and iconic, which is what you want in a superhero design. And I didn't realize it till much later, but it's also the Image Comics logo.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is kind of awesome. I don't know how intentional that was, because I know his original name was supposed to be Bulletproof. And Invincible's a much better name.
Oh yeah, way better.
Yeah.
That's the best thing that Bulletproof Monk movie did.
Yeah.
Was like make them second guess calling that comic Bulletproof.
Yeah. And it's funny that his name is Invincible and he's constantly just getting beaten to a bloody pulp. I don't know if that's I think that's a happy coincidence kind of joke. I don't think that's something they planned necessarily to do all that often, but
especially early in the comic, he's like he's doing a lot of the beating into a pulp.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's I think we both really like season 1, and I'm excited for season 2. Which I know they announced that they renewed for 2 more seasons at least.
That's cool.
So seasons 2 and 3. So hopefully they can eventually, if not get through the whole comic, which is 144 issues, so it's pretty big. They can at least get it its own ending. Rather, they know that they have at least 2 more seasons to do. But let's talk a little bit about some future comic book stories and how we think they might adapt them. So spoilers for the comics from here on out. So if you haven't read the comics and you're interested, pause it here, come back to it later after you come to the store and buy all of the compendiums and read all of them. Shoplevelup.com. We're getting them all back in stock. But yeah, so I think the next big story that like would happen would be the Angstrom Levy story, right?
Yeah. So in the comics, there's and I wonder how intentional this was, because there's a couple times they say like, oh, I don't really like Mark's talking. He's like, I don't really have like an arch nemesis.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's one time I can think of where it was like very intentional, like he's talking to his mom and like he's like, oh, like I told Amber my identity and she's like kind of pissed. He's like, oh, like don't worry, like they're not gonna like tell anybody. And also like it's not like I have an arch nemesis who's like hunting down my family.
Yeah.
And then like the next page is like Angstrom Levy, like
hunting down his family.
No, he's not a bad guy yet, but
Yeah.
as you know, in the future,
Yeah.
he specifically targets
Invincible. Yeah.
Debbie. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I know he specifically like goes after the family.
Yeah. Which Debbie, oh man, she is so cool in the show.
Yeah. She's also great in the comic too.
You think so? I think
I remember really liking her.
Nothing for a while.
Once the Omni-Man stuff happens, I think she really steps up as a character.
Yeah, but I thought it was really cool that like
I liked her. They had a lot of like that classic Lois Lane like feistiness to her. But I think because of the show has more of the focus on the Omni-Man story, she's able to get a lot more screen time than she did in the comic.
Yeah, I like that she's like kind of on the case and like, you know, like isn't giving Nolan a free pass like she suspects him for a lot of the season.
Yeah. Which is one of the benefits of them doing the Guardians of the Globe thing and revealing it to the audience early versus the comics. Yeah.
That was cool. And when it happened at the end of the first episode, I was like, oh wow, already, huh? But
I said the same thing. I was like, oh, okay, here we go.
But yeah, I think it definitely worked out for the best.
Yeah, but yeah, so Angstrom Levy, what's his deal?
Oh, he's a scientist, or he's some guy who, for whatever reason, has the power to move between dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
So in the beginning, it doesn't seem like he has any, you know, like he has any like evil in him or is going to use his powers for.
He just seems like a normal guy.
Yeah, and he's just like, oh, I have this ability. But his whole thing is he doesn't know anything about the dimensions he's going to.
Mm-hmm.
So he basically kidnaps the Mahler twins.
Yeah.
Brothers, whatever the hell they're called.
They're called Mahler twins, yeah. Even though they're clones of some guy who's presumably long dead.
But yeah, he kidnaps them and he's like, hey, I broke you out of jail. I need you to build a machine that just like will let me get the knowledge of all my multi-dimensional counterparts, just so I can like know what I'm doing and where I'm going.
Yeah.
So they do that, and you know, Cecil and his team are like kind of like keeping an eye on them, and then right as they're about to like activate the machine, Cecil's like, oh, Invincible, I need you to like go stop the Mahler twins from doing whatever they're doing. And Invincible just kind of shows up and starts like wrecking everything.
Yeah, he just smashes everything, right?
Yeah, and that causes the machine to malfunction, and now like Angstrom's brain is like huge and it's like going all down his back. And
yeah, I like that instead of the classic thing where like you just get a big head, like it kind of grows throughout the rest of his body, and it's really gross.
It's really gross, but very cool looking.
Yeah.
And yeah, at the end of it, he's like, I hate Invincible. Like,
he ruined my life.
Yeah, and like you can tell he's definitely like it's affected him. Like he is a little bit crazy. Like he like his immediate like memory of the situation is like a bit skewed. Like
yeah,
I don't remember the exact wording, but like he's like, oh, like Invincible specifically targeted me, so like now I'm gonna like.
He didn't even know he was there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
but he uses his power in a really fun way. So it's kind of meta, but Robert Kirkman was writing Marvel Team Up at the time, which is the Spider, you know, the it's usually Spider-Man, but like I think that story, that comic was specifically like different people teaming up every time. But he ends up starting to send Mark throughout different multiverses just to like keep him from his fam, like while he's trying to like kill his mother. And
I think that's his like second storyline.
Yeah, because I would say, because I think Oliver's there too, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, because like Angstrom's there, and like, yeah, during the reality hopping, like story, that I think that's Angstrom's like second supervillain show.
Yeah, but the reason I'm excited to potentially see it in the show, and I don't think they would do it exactly, but like, so Invincible gets kicked into what we would find out is Dr. Octopus in one panel, and then that immediately takes over one issue of Marvel Team Up, where he gets to team up with Spider-Man and then the New Avengers at the time, and then he gets kicked back into his reality, like it goes from panel like right back into that next issue of Invincible. And you get to see him go through all these different realities. Like one's clearly The Walking Dead. One, he's talking to what's clearly Batman, but he's referencing a conversation he had with Spider-Man about how lame their superhero names are in the Marvel issue. So I'm really excited to see what they could potentially do with that. I don't know if they pull in more Image characters as like different, because like Savage Dragon is at the Guardians of the Globe funeral in the comic. But like they obviously didn't use him in the show, but like it'd be kind of neat, like, hey, here's Savage Dragon. Oh no, I'm another one. Oh my god, it's the Apocalypse. That's Spawn. Like that, they could do some really fun things with that.
That would be really cool. Yeah, that's one of the fun things about the comic, is that like Image, like when Image first started, they were definitely just trying to make like a new superhero universe, but because everyone has creative control over their characters, you know, it's not going to be cohesive, because yeah, in Spawn you have like the end of the world happening, and then like Savage Dragon like has like
Osama bin Laden became a kaiju in it.
Yeah, which was awesome. But like he has like destroyed the universe he was like living in like 3 times now.
I'm pretty sure it was 3 times, right?
Yeah, like he doesn't live in the universe he like originally started in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's kind of crazy, but I really like the idea of like those characters all existing and just like doing their own thing.
Yeah, like the way the Image world, like shared universe kind of works, is just like each book is its own part of the multiverse, and they have their own versions of those characters doing their own thing, but they're not influenced by like the events in each other's books.
Yeah,
because I think usually when Savage Dragon shows up, it's still the original one in things, versus like there's been like what 2 or 3 other Savage Dragons, like it's like keeps being like his kids or his grandkids, right?
So it's his son right now, but I'm pretty sure that like Eric Larson's like, this is the Savage Dragon now, and I think like if you want to cross over with him, it's
this one.
Dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite issues of Invincible is it part of that storyline? Angstrom Levy like gets a bunch of evil.
No, this is a later one. That's the Invincible War, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Like it turns out in almost every universe, like Invincible breaks bad and basically just becomes just like what everyone fears Omni-Man is now. Yeah, he gets like infinite Invincibles to show up and kill regular Invincible.
Yeah. And so they do like a summer event in like one issue.
Yeah.
Which is, and it's so crazy because amazing, like reading that issue, it's like, oh, like all these stupid summer events that keep happening, all it needs is one issue, because like so much of that stuff is just like filler.
So and they're not even summer events anymore. For Marvel, it's just nonstop. Yeah. Like it. We've said it. I've said it. We've said it many times. Where like it's the status quo changing, like all like the events are they're so meaningless now. Like, but yeah, I remember at the time, like, oh, they did it in one issue. I was like, oh, this is better than like what I don't remember what was contemporary at that time, like Civil War or something.
Yeah, Civil War, like what was
Which I
that
never
one?
liked.
Like
Yeah,
Have No Fear. So, what was that one? Something about fear.
nope, they're
Fear itself. Fear
fear
itself.
itself. Yeah, which
So
is
dumb.
they're sprawling and they take like months and months to do, and they interrupt all of the books, and it's just like, oh my god.
Yeah. Uh yeah, that's usually when I drop a title.
Yeah, it's when I drop a title too, and it's why I don't get Marvel or DC anymore, really.
Yeah.
Not to say they don't put out quality stuff, because they do things I still do like, but broad strokes, like they're just so frustrating as a reader for these reasons. But yeah, this just affected Invincible. But then all of the other like heroes, like Image Comics characters, show up in that.
Yeah. It's like on one panel, it's like it's like, oh hey, Witchblade, are you having trouble? And like they have like a team up for like a page, and
it really feels like a big crossover event, and it's really fun.
It's and then like Savage Dragon and all those characters. Madman was there, which
is your favorite thing ever.
Dude.
Which the first trade paperback of Crossover just came out. I'm excited to read that.
Oh yeah,
another crossover comic with Madman in it. But yeah, that's a story I'm also like looking forward to see if they, because I don't know if they would hang back like for that, or like use it for the multiverse thing. Both would be fun.
I think logistically it's probably pretty difficult to like get so many characters permission and like
and because Robert Kirkman owns both these things, like I think you might see The Walking Dead make a cameo. I know Invincible's made cameos in that, in terms of like people, like some people have the toys or they're reading the comic book or something in the background.
Didn't Carl have a Science Dog shirt for the
he had a Science Dog shirt
or something,
which is something they changed in the show. He's Seance Dog now.
I wonder if it's because Robert Kirkman wants to keep Science Dog like available as a property to like sell for its own cartoon.
Yeah, I don't know.
I thought that was like an interesting change.
I took it more, and this might be a lot of just fan headcanon, I took it more as like a subtle hint that this is not the comic book world. Like early on, like if they're like, oh, that's not Science, because Science Dog's his favorite comic book in the comic, where it's Seance Dog and he's more like Doctor Strange. I mean, I'm sure in the multiverse thing he will team up with him. I hope so. They could do things like Astounding Wolfman, like other Kirkman stuff.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Which would be fun to guys like us, but like regular people probably won't care.
Another fun thing about the comics is like there's a lot, like in the show, it's like you have Teen Team and you have the Guardians of the Globe, and that's it.
The comics is a much more well-realized superhero universe. It feels so much more fleshed out.
Yeah, they're like talking about all these like teams that like you don't even see them all the time, but
they're just there. Like it feels like a really lived in like DC or Marvel-esque superhero world.
There's like Tech Jacket, which was like
another Kirkman character.
Brit, which was a Kirkman character.
Yeah, they eventually folded a lot of his like superhero characters into Invincible, because that was clearly the most popular one, so you might as well just put them in it.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I'm stoked for that Angstrom Levy.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what they can do with it. And like I remember being really like interesting and kind of messed up, and like I'm curious to see what like the new fan base is going to make of it when it happens. I guess I feel a little bit about like the game of like the Song of Ice and Fire people when the Red Wedding happened in Game of Thrones. It's like, ooh, I can't wait to see what people think about that event. Yeah, maybe a little bit like that. Because the other thing I really want to talk about is the return and rehabilitation of Invincible's father, Omni-Man. Because I remember happening way later than it did. But like you kind of find out where he went after he flew off into space. And he essentially kind of redid the same thing, but he discovered like So he goes to another planet where like bug people and like they age really fast. So he's been there for like generations of their time. And eventually, he has a wife and another kid who becomes Kid Omni Man. And it becomes Mark's like he's his half brother, but like his mother, Debbie, eventually adopts him because he's gonna outlive like everyone on this planet. So he comes back to Earth. Um, but I remember that being like really interesting, like and like because they're gonna start bringing in like the coalition of planets, which they mentioned because that's what Alan's a part of, and they're eventually build up to what's called the Viltrumite War, like a full out war between like everybody else versus the rest of the Viltrumite race. And that's going to get really cool. There's so much cool stuff in the future. We haven't even mentioned Dinosaurus, who's my favorite character. This like evil scientist like T-Rex who doesn't have like human ethics, but is trying to save the planet. So like he turns Las Vegas into glass because of all the resources and stuff. It's like they're diverting all this water, like all these things. Invincible eventually teams up with him. Is like, hey, what you're doing, how you're doing things are wrong, but what you're doing is right. So I'm gonna try to keep you on the straight and narrow. Like they play a lot more with like that kind of stuff, and I really like that as Mark gets older.
Yeah, because like,
and there's plenty of like really fun, like Adam Eve becomes an even better character. Like everyone, it just becomes so much better as it goes on. Everything keeps building on top of each other.
yeah, the Dinosaurus stuff. That's like I love that like moral, because like like I don't know, like the world can like suck, and like the way things are run like isn't really good to all people. So like
Yeah.
if you're like a young person with like, if you're a young person who's like essentially one of the most powerful people on the planet, like I can definitely see getting like lured to that way of thinking.
Yeah. And I know it just started a Netflix show, but I know Jupiter's Legacy kind of deals with that, where it's like different superheroes, like were started as superheroes as we know them, but like each generation they kind of get more distance from that. I know eventually they take over the United States because they're like, well, no one can stop us, like stuff like that. But like, yeah, but yeah, yeah, it's one of those things. Like I said, it plays the superhero tropes in a way that's very fun, but may not seem totally original by the time you get to them because it's been done so much in the intervening like 20 plus years. Because we just, as a society, we're so inundated with superhero stuff that like,
Yeah,
you have to do that to keep things fresh, which is why I find the Marvel stuff so boring now. Because they're not really going to change any of that stuff because they can't mess with the money train. But that's why like Spider-Verse was a lot of fun because it was so different.
oh yeah, and just like good, like
It was legitimately
classic,
great too. Yeah.
classic stories can be good.
Oh yeah, you just have to do them in an interesting, unique way.
Yeah, but but yeah, so after the Invincible story where he teams up with Dinosaurus, I stuck with it for maybe a couple months following, but
yeah, we should point out, yeah, we did. Why I feel like once Walking Dead's popularity really took off, that became Kirkman's focus, and you can definitely feel like reading the Invincible comic at the time. I wonder if reading it now, where you can read it all back to back, it doesn't feel as harsh a shift. But it definitely felt like it kind of lost focus and started spinning its wheels more, and kind of fell off being like the most consistently good superhero comic of the time.
yeah, it was just like, and I mean, maybe it could have also been like, Mark was, because like when Invincible started, Mark was in high school.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things I could relate to, like obviously not being a superhero, but
like he's trying to figure out what he wants to be in the world, like
yeah,
he's still a very human character.
Yeah, and maybe like him, like growing up, and him and Eve are had a baby at this time.
Yeah.
Which is not where I was at then, and I still don't have a kid, but
yeah,
I'm more open to that that as a narrative. But maybe it was like those things that weren't keeping my interest. But I don't know. It also felt like Invincible was always Mark's story, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like everything was kind of leading to the Viltrumite War.
Yeah.
And then once that happened, it's like, okay, like,
What do we do now?
yeah. And like, not that even like the Viltrumites remained important. But it was like, okay, there's not this like looming thing that like we know we're building up to. So maybe that took some of the excitement out of the book for me. But yeah, I dropped surely. I think it was like an issue where like Invincible's baby was playing with like Duplicate's baby, and I was like, I think this is it for me.
I know I at least got to issue 100 because the cover. I know I have the cover. I have it somewhere. Because what's nice about that is like so Invincible #1's cover is really boring. It's just him standing in front of a wall. But the issue 100's cover is essentially the camera from behind him from that same pose. But then it's all of the villains from the series, and that was really cool.
Yeah, that was awesome. I love
I know I at least picked that one up. But at the time we didn't know how long it was going to go, so I probably could have done another 44 issues if I knew it was going to end.
Well, Kirkman in those letter pages, Kirkman's like, yeah, like as long as the book like keeps selling, like his original vision was for it to be a book that he would eventually step away from as writer.
Mm-hmm.
And he would hand off to other creative teams, and like it would basically never ever end. So like stepping away, like when we were pretty much like getting close to like, the series as a whole, like the final like third of it.
Yeah.
At the time it seemed like, all right, but like I'll come back when it's interesting.
Yeah, it basically became like Spider-Man or whatever, like a regular superhero book where like I'll read there'll be parts of it I like runs I enjoy, and then I'll stop enjoying the next one, I'll stop, and then maybe I'll come back in again like when something interesting happens. But yeah, and it didn't become that. I wonder why he never handed it off. I wonder if there wasn't interest from anyone else of like, or at least someone of like a quality he felt like comfortable giving it to, because he could have just given it to us at the time and we would have written it no problem. But we were, who are we? But like, or yeah, because Image is creator owned, maybe people don't want to play in someone else's sandbox. They want to maybe do their own.
I mean, maybe, but like,
I think it would.
Prophet, for example, was like a Rob Liefeld property, and he let Brandon Graham like reboot and like play with that a little bit. Like there is precedent.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate because I honestly don't know, and I know obviously we don't know Robert Kirkman in real life, but that might be a question I might ask him if I ever meet him at a con. Maybe I don't know. I don't know. Maybe
because I mean I do kind of like that idea. Like
yeah, I think that could have been really fun. See other people's takes on that world.
Yeah, especially since it's not like this like corporate owned property that always has to like go back to some kind of status quo. Like that's probably what was the most exciting thing about Invincible, was that like there wasn't a status quo.
Yeah, that's why the effects of the book always felt like what would be like the actual what would be the actual consequences of every story in a superhero book. But like Peter Parker's always got to go back to being swinging single Spider-Man. Bruce Wayne's always got to be Batman, and like he's always got to punch the Joker. Like even if someone like fucking or freaking kills one of these characters, like they're coming back. They like it's a freaking joke at Marvel. Like there was a while where they killed like somebody like at least once a year. Like remember when the Human Torch was dead and then he got better.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? Like they did it constantly, and it's just like this is the lamest thing. I think it's
And like the crazy thing about like as much as I love that run where the Human Torch dies,
yeah,
like this it was the same, it wasn't even a different creative team that like brought him back, you know what
yeah,
I mean? Like
yeah,
it's not even like you could even remotely flirt with the idea that it was
permanent.
semi-permanent.
Well,
Like,
like oh yeah, it was especially bad when like Doc Ock and Peter Parker switched bodies, and then like Peter died in Doc's body. So now Doc Octopus is Spider Man. It's like yeah, give it a year, and then went almost to the date. And of course it lined up when a new Spider-Man movie came out, and then he's fighting that bad guy from the movie. I think it was Electro. He's fighting him in the comic now. It's like it always happens. Yeah, that's why like corporate superhero stuff, like it's very frustrating to me. It's like I can't not see like the money people being in charge of it, being like, here's what you have to do. Whereas versus like Invincible was very much like what Kirkman wanted to have happen happened, as long as as long as he made it make sense, it was fine. I never felt anything was overly contrived in that, and like reading it.
yeah, like the marketing on some of those like stories was like they did the whole like superhero, I guess skip forward a bit, but yeah, like Adam Eve gets brutally murdered
Yeah,
in the Viltrumite War. And I think the same issue or the next issue, she she resurrects herself.
yeah,
And like, so that like, because everyone was like, oh, Adam Eve's gonna die. But like that was cool because like her power set basically is built for her.
yeah.
She has like some of the more interesting powers of the story. But
She's got a
yeah,
little more interesting superhero power sets, like full stop.
yeah, like
Because they haven't gotten into it in the show yet, but like, yeah, there's a reason she's called Adam Eve.
yeah, and I think they set her up. Yeah, yeah, right. She's
Yeah,
like she built her treehouse or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. They showed us, but they haven't like explained why she can do the things she does yet.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah. So like that was okay. And then the issue 100 storyline was called "The Death of Everyone,"
yeah,
and that felt a little like
yeah. That felt like a joke at the expense of like Marvel.
yeah, which like I wasn't happy about. Like because like didn't Kirkman, yeah, like Kirkman had just quit Marvel.
Yeah, I don't remember the details. I don't remember if we even knew all of them, but like I think it was pretty negative, like the way they
Yeah,
left.
he wrote like a whole like manifesto.
Yeah, and like they never ever reprint any of the stuff that he does, like ever did over there.
Yeah, so like there was there was a bit in Invincible where it was like, okay, instead of like Kirkman telling like fun and interesting stories, like it kind of feels like he's just like trying to make Invincible like the anti-corporate superhero.
Yeah.
And like, I don't, like part of me like gets that.
Oh, I'm kind of down for that if that's like part of the core identity of the book.
But also,
but this
like,
wasn't what this was a shift. This wasn't what Invincible was up until that point.
yeah, and also like, yeah, like it's stupid, but there's like a reason like those things have been around for so long.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I don't want to. There are plenty of like parodies and stuff. Like, I don't know. I think The Tick is the perfect superhero parody, But like,
yeah,
I don't want Invincible to like sacrifice like what it has.
Yeah, what makes it special for that?
Yeah, just to like take pot shots at Marvel and DC.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how the show handles some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and
because the comics great. Yeah, because the comics great, but it's not perfect.
Yeah, and I've been rereading the comic. So I'm interested to see how like me as an older person,
Yeah. Yeah, because my tastes have
digest it.
changed too. Like I'm excited to revisit the comic as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun so far.
Yeah.
Um,
Because like I said, it was my favorite book in a long time, but I haven't read it since then. Part of that's because like I didn't own the trades you did, so I haven't had the chance to really like sit down and reread it. But the renewed interest, like all that stuff's like more readily available now than it ever was.
yeah, are they still printing the book in trade form? Because
Yeah, it's just still coming out. So it's got multiple different versions changed. They just did the compendiums, which are the way to go. So it's 3 volumes, it's the whole series. Like I know the first one's like 0 through 44, so they're like almost 50 issues each. So those are the way to go, and they're kind of expensive up front. They're like I think $64.99, but they're cheaper like per issue than buying. Like I think there's almost like 30 like regular graphic novels, and they're like $10 each or
yeah,
something like that.
I might try to fill out my set, or I might just like get to where I got. And
You might
I
realize you
think
don't
I,
want to keep going, and you can just stop again.
yeah, because I think the only Invincible like singles that I've not sold are the issue of Marvel Team Up and the Invincible War.
Yeah. The issue of Marvel Team Up I know is really expensive now.
Oh yeah,
Because now everyone likes Invincible, and like they'll never reprint it, and it's him and Spider-Man.
yeah, I got it. If someone wants to give me like $500 or
I have a copy too somewhere because I was reading Marvel Team Up at the time, so I just have that run. But yeah, I'm really excited for this for the series to continue. I'm really excited to reread the comics. It's kind of reminded me like it reminds me why I like superhero comics to begin with, because like Marvel and DC like don't really give me what I want anymore, and like and that's fine. I still really enjoy comics, but I read other things now. But it's kind of fun to go back to like why you like these stories. Like at the end of season 1, where the whole meme was like, "What do you have in 500 years? Think, Mark." He's like, "I would have you." I'm like, "Oh man, that hits in a different way that like it could if this was more of like a straight up drama." You know what I mean? Like the superhero elements, like it always ramps up like emotions and stuff. So I'm really excited that it's got an audience. The comic's being rediscovered. I'm glad it's a hit. I just wish it was Netflix or something else.
yeah,
But it is what it is. This is the world we live in, where like 4 or 5 corporations are going to own everything.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's the issue where Angstrom Levy's introduced, the opening scene of that issue, I think would be a great opening scene to season 2.
Okay, I can see that.
Because it just opens and it's like Omni-Man or it's Invincible, like in front of the like he's in like Times Square or something, and he's like everyone surrender, like me and my father like rule this planet now. And like you find out that it's like following an alternate dimension Angstrom Levy.
Yeah.
So, but I think there were a bunch of issues between, not a bunch, like a handful of issues between Omni-Man leaving and that issue. But I think like that would be like a great like shot. Like it's like, oh, like I guess Invincible changed his mind, like
I can see season 2 not even having Omni-Man in it, and they saving that stuff for the second one and building up Angstrom Levy as like the final climactic fight in that season. And like as I know they tease like the things going on Mars, like a couple of the smaller things, like they can do like the first episode can be about that or whatever, just to kind of like ease you back into it, while sprinkling like Angstrom Levy and building him up and like what happens to him. And I can see them doing the multiverse thing, like that being the second season. To me that's the second season of the show, versus like finding out what happened to Omni-Man and like meeting his new family. That to me, that's part of the third season, like maybe in the first half of that.
Yeah, I don't know how that would work.
I have no idea yet, but that's part of the excitement. Is like I'm excited to see how they do things.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm
Yeah,
glad this cartoon was made, and
because they've been talking about doing an animated series for years, man.
yeah,
To the
yeah.
point where I was like, I don't even believe it's happening anymore. Because we've talked about it a few times, like, oh, that would be really cool. But then it's like they keep saying like, we're making an animated series, we're making an animated series, and they even announced this one like 2 years ago or something, like, or maybe even longer ago than that, because 2020 doesn't even count.
I think we had to wait for like back when Invincible was coming out. Like, I don't think an animated series would have.
Oh no, yeah, no, that wouldn't have.
Like, because it's just they would either have had to like tone it down a lot
Yeah,
and like essentially make it like, here's your like, this is like your Toonami.
like this is the Justice League of Toonami or Adult Swim or something.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just like, oh, like,
It probably would
but
have
like
been,
now
fine, but
I think then we would have seen like a radically like different take.
yeah, I can see that.
But I think like to get this sort of adaptation, we had to wait a while till like the world was ready.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, like Disney shoving, you know, all this stuff down everyone's throats, and like, now like society is ready for like,
Yeah, society, enough of society's,
that.
yeah, now is society, enough of society's like sick of that.
Yeah.
And
So
it's not just been me for years. um but yeah, I like I said, I'm really excited for Invincible, and if anyone's discovering the comic now and want to come in the store and talk about it, I'd be really excited to get some new perspective thoughts on it. A bunch of people I know that I wouldn't peg for liking the show have told me they watched it and they like it. And I'm like, oh, okay. I know Becca, like, her big takeaway from it is she really hates the Demon Detective's design. I'm like, it's not good, but I'm like, it doesn't stand out to me that much. I mean, he's in the show way more than he's in the comic.
yeah, in the comic,
He's like barely there.
It's wild going back to that comic and like how much I loved it. There are two like, and I mean, who am I? Like, I don't know. If anyone's read my comics, there are tons of like awful storytelling decisions that I've made.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's like weird. Like when you first see that dude, Damien Darkblood, like the camera is always behind him. So like you see his entire body, and it's not like, I don't think they're trying to make him mysterious. Like you can see his body and you can see that he's not human, but you don't see his face in his entire first appearance.
Yeah, he feels like he's gonna be a bigger deal than he is. He just disappears really quick.
And then yeah, like you see him the second time, you do see his face. It's not like it's a crazy reveal. Like
he looks like a Japanese snow monkey. He's really weird looking.
Yeah, and everyone's just like, you're some crazy guy, and like,
Yeah.
And it's really funny because after where like season 1 of the cartoon ends, he like shows up at like the Pentagon, and he's like, I gotta see Cecil. I figured it out. Omni-Man's the one who killed the Guardians of the Globe. And he's like telling this to like Cecil's secretary, and she just like starts laughing at him. Like, oh, you're like way behind, dude. Like, everyone knows that.
But yeah, it's really good. I'm really excited. What the fight between Omni-Man and Invincible at the end of the show is way more brutal somehow, and like they found a way to make it more brutal, like by actively making them take part in like killing people in the fight.
So yeah, in the comic, like on the news, they're like, oh, like thousands are dead after this battle, but it doesn't really show that. Like, it was amazing. And
like the most brutal thing I've ever seen is when he's holding Invincible up into the oncoming train of people, just to show him how like, meaningless human lives are. I'm like, oh my god, and it just keeps going, like just because there's so much train. I'm like, holy, there's nothing he can do because he's so beaten.
It was great.
Great in a terrible way. Yeah,
and I do think they do a great job of like making you even though Nolan like killed the Guardians of the Globe,
The whole time you're like, he might still be a good guy. Like he might have done
like
it
they
for a
do a
reason.
good
Yeah.
job, yeah. And
Yeah.
then like so much better than the comic. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I would say this story is more effective in the show than it is in the comic. It's and the comic's not bad. That doesn't handle it bad, but it was definitely like, since it's like its first big quote unquote story arc, like it was still kind of finding its footing, and its voice.
yeah, and I guess they have to do it that way in the show, especially like here's the full season in one shot. Like,
Yeah.
whereas like the comics, you would have like at the bare minimum, you would have a month in between to like kind of grow attached to the characters. Like,
Yeah. It's a totally different animal experiencing TV, that a streaming show like we do now versus like a monthly comic.
yeah.
And like they've got benefits, and they each have pros and cons. Part of the cons is like waiting between issues. It's like sometimes I'll just forget stuff, but like where's the show, especially now when we can stream and binge it, like you can basically tell like much stronger long form narrative.
Yeah, for sure.
Like that's like, to talk about Doom Patrol again, like after watching that, it made me go, because they specifically break the fourth wall and reference that this is an adaptation of the Grant Morrison run. So I read the Grant Morrison run, which is a lot of like every issue is almost like its own separate story, but because of because it's an adaptation, they tie everything together more cohesively, and it becomes a much more satisfying narrative experience. So that's one of the benefits you can have when you do an adaptation, is you can see what works together better, and you can kind of stitch it together and make a stronger whole, a stronger story as a whole. Because like you said, like a lot of the elements I like all the changes they did with Amber. I like that Debbie was more involved in the investigative aspect of it.
Yeah, those are they were like two of my, like they were both very enjoyable. Whereas like in the comic, like I was like, oh, don't really care. I did not care for Amber at all.
Like I said, I forgot she even existed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder how much more involved like Amber and William and those kinds of characters are going to be throughout the series. Because then William and Mark go to college together, weren't they roommates?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know he at least hangs around for a bit.
Yeah. They kind of, I feel like this is like a couple podcasts in a row where I get into like white writers and black characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like making Amber black and making her interesting was like really cool.
Yeah.
Black Samson in the comic is like just kind of like really pathetic. Like when you first see him, he's like, he's lost his powers and he's just like depressed and like going crazy in his like mansion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Bulletproof is kind of like a asshole. Like there's like no redeeming black people in the comic.
There was Titan. He was a
Titan
bad guy,
was,
but he wasn't a bad guy.
Titan was cool. But also like kind of stupid. Like
Yeah.
he's done, even he is like, for as much as I like enjoyed him in the comic, he's so much better in the show. So it's it does a really good job of like kind of updating those characters to suit the political climate that white people are just now realizing exists.
And it is funny, like Black Samson, when he does get his powers back, they are lightning related. It's another example. I was thinking about that during the show. I'm like, wow, it's always,
that's got to be on purpose, right?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be, because with the way the series also like plays with like other characters, because like Monster Girl's clearly a parody of like the Hulk, like those kinds of characters with a weird twist on it. You know what I mean? Like they have to know.
Yeah.
But Yeah, that's interesting because it's like it's only been like it hasn't even been 20 years since the source material on that, and like just even like those small tweaks go such a long way to making it feel so much more different and modern.
Yeah,
You know?
it's just like way back because yeah, I was like noticing that. I was like, oh, the few black people they have here are all like just like no one's cool.
Yeah. And like Viltrumites are all white guys. There's not a black one, right?
I think there
I think
is.
there's one. I don't remember.
Yeah,
Most of the ones I can remember are white dudes with mustaches because they all have mustaches.
yeah. The main ones are all white people, I feel like.
Yeah. But so maybe there's something about like white colonization. There's all kinds of things we could read into that then, if we were to look at it from that angle. But I don't think it's trying to do that.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, so I think that would be a bad faith argument.
Yeah,
but it might be something an interesting reading to look at later. I am curious to see how they handle some of that stuff in the show then.
Yeah, I'm stoked to see. I'm stoked to see them show up. They showed up way earlier in the comic, like other Viltrumites than I like remembered.
Yeah, like issue 50-ish. I thought it was like
even before that, they like show up and beat the crap out of Alan, like beat him to a pulp.
Oh, that might happen next season then in the show. I do remember that. But I remember they started like getting like basic screen time. I remembered it being like later than it is in the comic. Which is, which like that's probably why I kind of want to revisit the comic. I'm like, it's not really how I remember it. Like I kind of want to, because I remember really liking it. So I want to go back and enjoy it again. Or see if like, hey, my taste is changing. Like this is bad. Which I don't think is going to be the case, but you never know. Some of that stuff, when you go back to it, like, oh God, I liked this so much. Like we're like talking about that Spawn I used to read. I'm like, I would go back and look at that now. I'm like, oh, this is bad. Like tastes grow and change. Like I don't really like anti-heroes. I find them very boring as an adult. But when you're like, 14, 15, like they're the coolest dudes in the world,
Especially like Spawn. It's just like, oh, like, because like he could do anything, right? That was his whole like deal. Like he has unlimited power.
No, it used to be he had a ticking clock. So as he used his power up, he would eventually go away. But like that's a narrative dead end for a character that's gone on for 300 issues. So that's all gone. Now he does whatever. But like the apocalypse has happened like many times, and like it's just I don't know how that series keeps going, but it's more popular now than it's been in a long time.
It's always one that I like think about. Like there are things here I probably would dig because like
it's got stuff in it I like. I like the idea of like the devil's general on Earth that like rebels against him. Like that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
because I like the idea of the Ghost Rider movie where like you're the devil's bounty hunter. Like I think that's neat. It's not executed well, but that like Colonel is cool.
Yeah, I think all those like launch image titles, like they all like have something that could be like either like narratively interesting or just like a lot of fun, but like they get like out of control. Like even like Savage Dragon, I think was like really cool, but like the beginning of it is like so stupid. And then like where it's at now, like just like it definitely has lost me, but like
Savage Dragon's a book that I occasionally poke my head into because like they did a recent one where like every page was like a 2-page spread of like a different Sunday comics thing with like the characters in it. And like that's kind of neat. Like I don't understand what any of these characters are. But I was just like, oh, this one's Peanuts. Oh, this one's Calvin and Hobbes. Like, oh, that's cool. And then I put it back on the shelf. And I'm like, what about my day?
Eric Larson definitely like sets like little challenges for himself, which is a lot of fun. Like there's like one issue where like it like I might be getting this backwards, but I think it like starts, there's like 9-panel grids, and then like each page he like takes away a panel until it's like in the middle of the book is 2 splash pages. Mm-hmm. And then from there he starts like adding a panel each page.
I mean, that's cool. I mean, you can tell that's a series like he just has fun with because he's been writing it the whole time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like which is
And drawing it.
Yeah, writing and drawing it for years, every month.
Since like 1990.
Yes, for like decades. Like I can't imagine and creating anything I'd be that interested in working on for that long creatively. Like I said, I've mentioned it before. Like the One Piece thing blows my mind that you can make like 1,000 comics and still want to keep going.
I think both
as a creator,
Yeah, I think both of them are set up like less so with Savage Dragon, but like that Ninja Turtle thing you were talking about, where like they kind of fit into like all these different types of stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like the current arc of One Piece is like a samurai epic, and like
I think I would really get into One Piece. I did read the first couple volumes of the manga and it didn't do much for me. But it's just my concern with getting into One Piece is like it's so much, and I'm like, I've only got so much time left. And it's like it didn't grab me from the get-go. I'm like, I don't know if I care about Luffy and stuff. It's just one of those things where it's just like I think the hurdle for me to get into it, to get to the stuff I would enjoy, is too great. Does that make sense?
It does. I think you would dig it.
I think I would too. It's just I just don't feel like putting in the work to get to the stuff where I get to the point where I will dig it. And who knows? Maybe I just needed to read one more chapter, and then that was the
Yeah, I mean the great thing about like manga, especially shonen manga, is that like it reads pretty quick.
Yeah, I've got the app on my phone, so if I really want to, I can just blast through it. I'm sure.
Yeah, but anyway, this isn't a One Piece podcast.
Maybe we'll talk about that in more depth some other day. Maybe I'll read all 5 million issues of it, and we can talk about it like in 10 years. But yeah, so I guess since we're getting so wildly off topic, we should probably end this one. So yeah, definitive thought: Invincible season 1's good. Invincible the comic good. Excited that people are liking both of them. I'm really excited to see what they do in the follow-up seasons and stuff. I don't think this will necessarily lead to a comic revival, but
I was thinking about that, like like I feel like The Walking Dead, even though The Walking Dead like ended after the show started, like I feel like he still dips his toes back in that pool every once in a while.
Yeah, occasionally get like a Negan one shot or something.
Yeah, so I do wonder, like, because I don't know exactly how Invincible ends, but I do know I know some things. So like,
yeah, I'm in the same boat.
There's definitely like a story to tell there.
Yeah, there's things they can do, but I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily want like a comic revival, because I'm always of the opinion sometimes dead is better. But we'll see. I mean, if I only want them to come back to it if there's a story to tell. I don't want them just to put out, again, not to rag on Marvel and stuff, but like Civil War 2 literally only happened so they could have a book called Civil War on the shelves when the new movie Civil War came out. Like it's just there to promote the movie.
Yeah.
I don't want them
everyone out of character again.
Yeah, God. Like I don't even know what any of these characters are like in character anymore. All the Guardians of the Galaxy's personalities completely changed after the movie. Now Star-Lord is this music-loving like moron, and like it's bad. But like that's the nature of those kinds of books when they have to have big corporate synergy.
Yeah.
So Invincible, like again, can be something else, and you know what? Maybe he'll let people finally play in that world. Maybe it'll be Invincible universe. Fun. Every story is a different creative team and different characters in different time periods. I don't know. They could do so much that's fun.
Yeah, the doors open. Well, it's not open, but like, yeah, there are definitely stories to tell. And like his original vision was that like it would be running today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
but I'm excited to reread the series. I'm excited for season 2.
Yeah. There's so
Cool
much good
stuff.
stuff in the future for both of us here.
Yeah. But in the meantime, uh, if you're hankering for a story about a up and coming superhero,
Yeah.
check out Star Savior Bunny. Star Savior Bunny at Instagram, and look at all the cool things she's doing.
Yeah, man. It's nowhere near as violent enough for people that like Invincible, though. You got to change that next issue.
Oh, issue 5.
Oh, okay. All
like,
right.
I mean, like, you don't got buckets of paint.
Yeah.
But issue 5 is a big fight that ruins Center City, Philadelphia.
Oh no, it got ruined. Not in real life this time.
I mean, yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being my guest, Kendell. I was really looking forward to talking Invincible with you because it's something we haven't talked about in a long time. I'm glad you were able to watch the show. I know the universe was conspiring against you for a minute there.
Oh yeah, man. I was trying to. I knew we were like recording at this certain time. I was like, all right, I have this block of time. I can like bust through a couple episodes, and then, oh, there goes the electricity. I guess everyone was putting on their air conditioning or something.
Yeah. Oh God, it's been so hot. Anyway, but yeah, so I knew at the very least I wanted to talk to you about the comics, because that's something we haven't talked about in a while because we used to talk about it all the time. But yeah, so that'll do us for this episode. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned next week. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about yet. That's the thing I'm gonna have to figure out while I'm editing this episode. But we have a lot of topics we want to do. It's just a matter of syncing up people's times between the new store opening up in Summers Point and like a lot of people being teachers or students and like school being in like finals right now. It's kind of hard to get people together. But so I'm not sure what the next episode's going to be, but we've got a couple of ones planned out to do. Follow us levelupentertainment.com. That's got everything you're going to need to know from us. Until next time, be safe.